To the other top story that we bring you for you today, we continue getting reaction to the Gauteng Premier's decision to fire the Health MEC, Dr. Bandile Masuku. I'm now joined by Advocate Stefanie Fick, who is the Chief Legal Officer at the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Your reaction to the dismissal of MEC Masuku, and I ask you this, bearing in mind that this may be reversed depending on what the SIU outcome is on the corruption and collusion issue.
I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think it's in where we are currently in South Africa, trying very hard to eradicate corruption. I think it's a good step. I just hope it doesn't end there. That the SIU will try and recoup money that was lost, that it can go back to the citizens of South Africa, and that there will be other steps, and that we will also see some responsibility in that the person is just not reappointed somewhere else until this case is finalized. I mean, if he is then prosecuted, which we hope he will be, that he is then innocent until proven guilty.
And in your view, Stefanie, sorry for that, but in your view, if he were to be prosecuted, on what grounds do you believe that prosecution should happen?
Well, I think there's a criminal case to be made out. I mean, if he didn't abide by the PFMA, fruitless and wasteless expenditure is a criminal offence. And if there were fraud of any kind, if there were orders or whatever, if there was a misrepresentation made, then obviously he can be prosecuted for fraud. One has to leave that open to the NPA, that they should read all the facts and draw a proper charge sheet. But I think, prima facie, just looking at what is currently in the media, I am convinced that there were some criminal activities, and that, the case should be taken to the NPA and that the NPA prosecute.
Stefanie, you say that based on what already has been found against the MEC, you think it's good enough reason to dismiss him. But what do you make of the Premier's statement that if there is a different finding on the issue of whether the MEC was involved in corruption or not, that he will reinstate him? What message does that communicate to you and to the greater people of Gauteng and South Africa broader?
I think I agree with your stance. There shouldn't be, he should be fired and let the process unfold. Once he is found, I actually want to go as far as, even if he's found not guilty in a criminal matter, because remember, in criminal matters, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, that I think that there are some disciplinary issues and other issues that also need to be aired before a person can be reappointed. I think accountability on whatever level is extremely important for South Africans. Leaders in communities, leaders in government is extremely important. And I think if there's a whiff of corruption or anything, I think that, these people should be held accountable, and not, like I said, I think I'm repeating myself, not necessarily criminal, but on other levels. Do we want leaders in government that there is, something hanging over their head? And I think not.
Advocate, let me ask you this, and you will remember that when the Premier was talking about the reasons why it was important for him to actually dismiss the MEC, he spoke of a precedent. He spoke about the importance of setting a precedent. Now, if a precedent is to be set with MEC Masuku, what does this then retrospectively mean for so many other members of parliament, so many other senior members of the African National Congress who are also finding themselves in similar situations? Is this not perhaps opening a can of worms that then has to be equitably exercised across the board?
Yes, I agree. It should be exercised across the board. I think we listened to the President saying we want to eradicate corruption. And this is the first step in trying to accomplish that. We use the term innocent until proven guilty very lightly, but one must remember that's a constitutional right only if you are an accused. And that, if I like to use the example, if you, let's take anything else in life, if you have a child in school and there's certain allegations, would you want to send your child to a school where, something is not right? No. You want people to be held accountable for unlawful, whether it's criminal or not, for unlawful conduct, and they should be removed. And I also want to add, I think there are a number of people that can fill a number of positions. And maybe better, give the youth an opportunity to show what they are made of. We do not have to cling to individuals that may open themselves up for corruption.
Advocate, I just want to ask this question to Sbu here. Sbu, Advocate is talking about giving the youth an opportunity. And I'd like to talk about how perhaps the younger officials, because in all truth and honesty, MEC Masuku does qualify as one of the younger leadership within the African National Congress. What does this then say about how the younger officials within the African National Congress are being treated as opposed to the older one? I mean, we were looking actually at some of the Facebook tweets that were coming through, and that tension and that dynamic seems to be resurfacing at this time. Just your thoughts about that?
Actually, I think it's part of the frustration and also part of the disappointment. I think when Premier Makura had to suspend the MEC, he actually did say that he was seen as the new blood that is being injected. I mean, as MEC, in terms of the work that he was doing and being active and being agile as an MEC, he actually was doing well on that front. I think the disappointment here was on the issue of his handling of the PPE issue, which perhaps explains why Makura is a bit ambivalent on the issue, where he says that I fired him on the one hand, but also I'm waiting to see what the outcome is in terms of the finding in relation to the issue of corruption. And I think, Tammy, the important thing here that I'd like Advocate Fick to explain is just how serious is a finding on a failure on dereliction of duty and failure to implement the PFMA, because an impression may have been made by the Premier that those findings are not strong enough for him to fire the MEC. You ask a very valid question. PFMA is a very important piece of legislation. I think it's a piece of legislation that is there in order to make sure that, just the general business of government is done correctly. And we cannot accept that someone that just passes over the PFMA is going to be excused. I think, and that is what I was trying to say. Irrespective of whether someone is guilty of corruption per se, just the fact that you ignore a very important piece of legislation like the PFMA, there must be consequences. There must be consequences. And that is enough to fire someone.
Advocate, thank you so much for your time. But as we're having this conversation, I'm having a bit of a flashback to a former Minister of Housing at the time, or MEC of Housing in the Free State at the time, Mosebenzi Zwane, saying that he actually had no knowledge of the Housing Act as well. So very much ties into the conversation that we're having now. But thank you very much for your time and your insight this afternoon, Advocate. That's Advocate Stefanie Fick there from the organization Outdoing Tax Abuse. And thank you very much to you, Sbu. Great having you with us in the studio once again. We'll see if we can rip you back down very shortly. That's our politics editor there, Sbu Ngalwa.